Hello, super expanders. How are you? I have full body chills over here because I'm about to share someone so special with you. I can barely contain it. I feel like I should make you wait a second longer. No, but that wouldn't be very nice. I'm so excited to share with you Marsha Vanwynsberghe. She is truly a light. She is a dear friend of mine, an inspiration, and just truly epitomizes what a super expander is. Marsha, I'm so excited for you to be here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Like I literally jumped up and down when I saw you launch your podcast. I was like, yes, I'm so excited for you. And I'm thrilled to be a guest here.
Yeah, I know we've had so many conversations where I was like, I'm launching a podcast. I'm launching a podcast. I was just telling someone the story the other day about how I had the microphone was in a box on the floor. And
Yep.
then I took it out of the box after it sat there for about 6 months, maybe a year. And I put it on my desk and I let it stare at me for a few months longer before it stared at me so long. I was like, I gotta dust this thing off and put it to use only because I bought it. And oh, there's a true mission behind the podcast, but it did stare at me before the name came and all the things. But I think actually, I mean, you're like such an inspiration in terms of podcasting for me. Just, I mean, you're so consistent. You bring so many amazing guests. You share such powerful stories. So I'm so glad that you get to be on the other side of the microphone today.
This is fun. I like being on the other side. I'm on the interview side 4 times a week. So I like being on this side.
Ah, wow. I like to go deep and I go there fast. So we're just going to dive into
Perfect.
the juicy bits and we're just going to go there. So let's just open this up with who's Marsha? Like at your core, deep down inside, tell us who you are.
I'm laughing right now. I am a feisty, redheaded, Aries Ram, strong-willed person. Honestly, that's just me at the core, who has truly learned how to let go, like relax, enjoy the moment, trust the process. Like I laugh when I look back at my journey. I am such a passionate person, multi-passionate person with lots of different spokes to what I do, with its storytelling, business coaching, 2-time podcaster, 6-time, almost 7-time published author. And I am so passionate about helping people to learn how to overcome and share their shame stories, which is not something that people always like to talk about. But we all have these stories that we hold on to, that we feed because we hide in shame. And I have learned firsthand the power of truly letting people see who you are. And then that allows you to build the connection that you're meant to have. Like we hide these parts of ourselves and then we feel lost because we're not connected with others. And we're literally the ones that are hiding. So I've learned this firsthand, and I get to help so many women. And especially over the last couple of months, there's some male clients that I'm loving working with who are in this space of saying, wait, my stories don't have to define me. I can actually do something different with them. And I look at it and say, yes, you can do something different with that story, but you can also learn how to use that story, in a sense, the lessons that you learned, and impact others. So when you can come to a space of learning how to take your pain and turn it into a purpose, it's just such a beautiful thing. It really is.
Oh, it's so true. We have to back up for a second because if you guys could see, my eyes jumped out of my head. You have red hair.
Yeah,
I
I
think
know,
I need
right?
to. I don't mean to overshadow all of the greatness that you just shared before that, but I got very fixated on. I was like, wait, I've never seen Marsha with red hair before.
Yeah, it's like a strawberry blonde. But when I just recently, somebody sent me a picture. We've been going through pictures because my mother-in-law is ill, and we've been going through all these pictures. And it's like, my husband was like, look at how red your hair was. And I'm like, I have gone from red to strawberry blonde most of my life. So it's, yes, I've pretty much always blamed my feistiness on being a redhead.
Okay, now we can really dig in. I couldn't let that. I was gonna just sit there in my mind until I asked. So shame stories. This is powerful. And I
Mhm.
think we do actually, we all carry levels of shame around with us, and it feels shameful to even admit that you feel shame. So it's like double shame, right?
It is. It is. We feed it. We feed it. And I think we like to pretend that we don't have it, that we don't, like we don't have those pieces of ourselves, but every single person does. Every single person does. And there's no fault or shame in it, pardon the pun, because it's all individual and personalized to each of us. So what feels heavy to you, you might tell a friend and they're saying, what's the big deal with that? It doesn't, it's not, it's very reflective and it's very personal. And I just really started to realize over the years how heavy some of these stories are and the power of vulnerability. But vulnerability is really scary. Like it's scary to let yourself be seen. But I've just learned firsthand, like some of the most incredible people I have met in my life are because of this work and allowing myself to be seen and to really help others to learn how to share their stories.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So on the case of shame, or on the topic of shame, it has me. I mean, we could probably completely geek out on the subconscious mind and all of that. So in your work with helping people share their stories, do
Mhm.
you delve into that piece of really the originating place of shame isn't really what they think it is? That it's
Actually,
actually something from their childhood that has been the lens with which has created their life?
that is such a great question. And yes, it's so true. We feed this story, we think it's the story, and then we really start to look back and unpack. And a lot of times it is, whether it is childhood stories, whether it is, something that's happened. I mean, there are people that I work with incredible trauma. They've come through unbelievable trauma stories and they're on the other side of it, but they look at it and think, I still don't know how to talk about it. And this story still feels like it has a lot of power over me. And I don't want to live like that. So that's really where it comes from. But yes, we do go back and start to unpack, like, where might this have come from and what does this mean? But we both know how powerful the subconscious mind is. And you can keep something alive that didn't even wasn't that magnitude at the time. Like we can feed a story and make it mean something that it never did. But this is all part of the work, is really unpacking the stories, unpacking and looking at them. And then on top of it, really looking at, like, where's the root of it? Where did it come from? And how have you been feeding the shame story? Like, I mean, there are people that live through unbelievable traumas and then they will beat themselves up because I didn't do more. I didn't do enough. And I had one just recently. I'm like, you were 9. You were 9. Like maybe we need to forgive the 9-year-old girl who really is not her fault because she was in a place with a master predator. Like, how can we look at this differently? And by unpacking them and starting to heal those parts of ourselves, we just become a completely different person. All relationships can change, right? Our energy, our outlook, our mindset, everything can change when we start to unpack and heal those parts that we've been carrying around forever.
Oh my goodness, it's so powerful. So do you think in a piece of the sharing of the story, that's like, what stage of healing do you need to be in to be at the place where you're ready to share the story? I feel like that's like the tipping point that's like gets you over to the other side. But what's the kind of work that someone has to do leading up to that?
That's a fantastic question. And I've learned just from doing this over the last few years, specifically, that yes, there is a tipping point. A person, how I like to describe it, is when they are in their story. Now, that doesn't mean that you're physically living in it right now, but subconsciously you're still living in it. That
Mhm.
means when you're living in it, you're in a victim state. There's zero judgment because I spent a long time there. But when you're in a victim state, you are asking all of the questions of, like, why me? This is not fair. Why is this happening? When is this going to change? Like, those are questions that you ask expecting the outside world to change. And when you're in that space, no change happens. We just keep going in the same hamster wheel over and over. So now I'm in a space that when a client does come to me in that state, it's like you have to not be living in the story. When you're living in the story and replaying all the scenarios, you're keeping it alive. Like you're literally keeping it alive. You can't change it in that standpoint. But when you learn how to be on your story and not in your story, you have a completely different mindset. You are able to have perspective. You're able to have this vision that maybe I could do something with this. Maybe this could help others. Maybe this could shorten their learning curve. Maybe this could, there are other humans out there who are looking for solutions that I have learned answers to. Maybe I could help others. Like you, that's the shift I have found. And for some people, they will stay stuck in the story forever because that's where they're at. That feeds them. It feeds part of that dependency to the story. Again, zero judgment. I did it for the longest time, but no change happens from there. So you have to be in a space where you're willing to look at it and say, I want to do something different with this. And when you want to turn your pain into purpose and make it like create meaning from it and help others and do something in that productive state, and it becomes something that's outside of you, right? It's outside of you. You start to see that it can do something more than just me. I can actually make an impact out there and serve, support, impact others. Then you start to see it differently. That is when change starts to happen. So I do think people have to have made that leap. And as we're in this space right now, one of the things that I do is helping authors with writing a story, or we're working in our collaborative books. Even then, it's becoming very apparent that people have to be in the state of not being stuck in their story to write it, speak it, share it, all of the things. I think they have had to make some of that transition, or even started to see some of that transition in order to be able to free themselves from that shame story.
Wow. So when I was listening to that, I just actually was thinking that that moment when you start to share your story is actually someone's super expander moment, because they, by sharing your story, you actually then are opening this up for someone else. You get to be a super expander for someone else. When we start to open up and share our stories, we show others what's possible, the survival, the grit, the resilience, the healing that can happen from all of that.
Oh, that makes me emotional to think of it. Honestly, it really does, because I've never looked at it that way before, but that is exactly it. When I can see some of the clients that I get to work with now, and I see the change in them and how different they are and how different their life is, how better their relationships are, because they could see that they could do something with their story, it gave it such a different meaning. And I won't stop this work because I know the difference that it's made. It's taken all of the pain and challenge and everything that I went through, and it just gave it purpose. And I remember a turning point where it was like, okay, if I can find my way through this, can you please show me? Like, I will do whatever. Let me do anything with it. And maybe I'm meant to do something with it. And I said that to a counselor once. I was so frustrated and so tired because there's no answers anywhere. I'm looking everywhere. At this point, 7 years ago, nobody's talking about difficult stories. It's almost this taboo. And she said to me, maybe that's because you're supposed to do it. Maybe you're supposed to be that person. And that, so in a way, she was a super expander for me, but she did open up that thinking, and it's changed everything. Because I do honestly believe, I really truly believe that there comes a point in our lives when we have made it through a difficult part of our story, a difficult time in our life. And once we've learned those lessons, like once we've walked through that door, those lessons actually aren't for us anymore because we've already learned them. They're for us to pay it forward back to somebody else. That is like at my core what I believe. So a lot of times I'll ask my clients, it's like, you've found your way, you've opened the door and you're walking through. Are you going to let the door slam on the person behind you who's stuck in the same spiral that you are? Or are you actually going to turn around, keep the door open and show her how to do it? And that gives people who have come through significant painful stories purpose. And it just changes everything.
Mm, I felt that. I felt that. So it's a little speechless here. Not that that's not a good thing when you're the
It's happened
interviewer.
to me before. I get
I'm like, oh, hold on.
it.
Oh, so who in your life has been a super expander for you? Because I feel like, I mean, through the difficult pieces, through moving through them to becoming someone who inspires others to share their stories, who inside of your life has been a super expander?
I have a number of them. I can think of specifically this one counselor when she said that it shifted my thinking and I could see things differently. I would say my sister has been a super expander in for a number of different reasons. I would say two women who maybe their names have been mentioned here, maybe they haven't. About 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I went to two events. One was with Kathy Savage, and she ran a fitness business like mastery program, my very first group program. And I remember going in and I was like, okay, I'm in fitness at this point. I'm going to build a fitness business. And we started talking about my story and she's like, no, you're going to write a book. And I'm like, I'm not writing a book. There's no way I'm writing a book. And that planted the seed. And that did plant a seed. And she was like, no, you're not here doing this. You actually have something very different. So she shifted that thinking. The other was Alexi Panos. And I remember this vividly because I was I think there's about 300 people at this event. And she asked the question, what would you share with your audience? Like, what do you wish you could share with your audience? And for me, at that point, I was really still stuck in my shame story. And I was very in a really dark spot. But I was posting all these positive quotes on Facebook because that's what helped me have light at that time. But God, I was so tired of everybody saying it's easy for you because you're strong. You're strong. So you're so positive. I'm like, no, I'm working on it every day. And she asked me, what is it? And I said, that frustrates me because people think that this comes easy to me and it doesn't come easy. I just commit to doing the work every day. And she said, but how would they know if you don't find a way to tell them? And I was like, well, how am I supposed to tell them what's going on in my life when I can't figure out how to put things in words? And she said, it's time to learn vulnerability. It's time to learn how to share. That changed everything for me because then I started to share my story in a very honest way, but not from a victim standpoint, but from a standpoint of somebody who's ready to change. So I am actually very blessed. I have had so many super expanders, to be honest. Like I've had so many. And I think that's why I love the name of your show and what you do here, because we're not meant to do this alone. Like we're not. So if you're trying to do this alone and build a business and push your way through, it's a really fast way to go nowhere. Like you're going to be stuck on this cycle. We are meant to have super expanders. And if you have had a super expander, then you owe it to be a super expander to someone else because we're not meant to do this alone.
Oh, yeah, it's like passing the torch. Oh my gosh,
Yep.
I love that. That makes me think. So, does Kathy know you wrote a book? Did you send her a copy?
Oh, I sent her a copy and she has shared and promoted my stuff so much. It's like it's beautiful because like I don't have any other tie to her than that. And recently I reached out to her, like she's just a beautiful person, but I reached out to her and said, I would love to have you as a guest on my podcast because that feels very full circle for me, like to be able to share. And she's like, I'd absolutely love it. I love the work that you do. So, these are people who poured into me at times when I was my most broken. And I look at what they do, and I'm just so grateful because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for people who showed up and gave back in that way. But I also had to be open to receiving, right? I had to be open to receiving that support, open to learning, open to growing. And I was, because I didn't want to stay where I was.
I love that. I always have to ask because I feel like sometimes when we start talking about our super expanders, I want to be like, do they know? Do they know they were a super expander? Did you tell them? Because I feel like that's a really big, important piece. The acknowledgement. And it feels good to be acknowledged and validated for it. But I think it's also a piece of for us in our stepping into our super expander-ness, it's you also have to acknowledge and give gratitude to the people whom have paved the way for where we are, for where you are.
100%. Like I said, 100%. I think I love to be honest and pay that gratitude back to them and let them know the difference that they made, because I think it's important. And I truly mean it. I mean, I would even say you've been a super expander, to be honest, Corey. I seriously say that because I know we've never met in person, but we have spent a lot of time on Zoom before. And I know from your story, the changes and how much growth you've had in your own business. And I find that incredibly inspiring, like incredibly inspiring. I don't look at that. I don't sit in any of those spaces of comparison, or I look at it and I think it's amazing. They show what's possible. So thank you.
Oh my goodness, guys, I'm about to cry here. I'm blushing. Marsha's got red hair and I've got a red face. I receive that. Thank you so much. That
You're welcome.
yes, chills,
You're welcome.
chills, and appreciation all around. You have also been a super expander for me. So a little context, we have been in multiple masterminds together. I've actually been on Marsha's podcast, which was, I think, one of the first, I think it might've been the second or third podcast that I was ever on. So that was back in my, like, just getting started days. Yep. And Marsha was so kind to bring me on her podcast and help me share my story. And then from there, we've gone through several certifications together, and she's just been such a cheerleader. And I appreciate you so much for that.
Received.
Yeah. So it makes me think. So I see you're wearing right there on your wrist, My Intent bracelet, which brings me to my next question. And maybe what's on your bracelet is actually what I'm going to ask. So I'd love to know, what is your North Star? What is the feeling that you are reaching for every single day?
You know what? I have so many things that could be my North Star, but I definitely actually will refer back to my my intent bracelet, because it says be the change. And it's always been a reminder for me when I was in low spaces, dark spots. It's sometimes you sit there and say, like, when's this going to change? What's going to happen? And I remember somebody saying to me, I remember reading about be the change. And I thought, that seems ridiculous when you're like looking around and in this dark space. But it was an eye opener for me of where can I be that change? So every time I have a frustrating moment, and yes, it happens a lot, I have a frustrating moment or a frustrating experience or a challenge, I stop and think, okay, are you being the change that you wish to see? Like, forget what he's saying, she's saying, they're doing, all those things. Because I really believe in like full radical responsibility and taking ownership for all of my choices. I often think back to like Stephen Covey's quote, it has been a North Star for me. It was a shift for me, is you're not a product of your circumstances, you're a product of your decisions. And that for me was a space of like, okay, I can still choose how I respond to everything that happens to me. I do have a choice. And that's what be the change means.
You guys maybe should rewind the podcast and listen to that again, because that was good.
I love how you don't know where it's going to come, but I love that you tied it to that, because that is a big piece of it. And with that, one of the things I always say with all of my clients, I say it, it's like my tagline, everything is like, someone somewhere is praying for the solutions you're holding on to. Stop being selfish. I say it with love, but I do say that.
Oh, I love that. It's so good. All right. So it's that time. It's that time to start, like, landing the plane here, because I know that you have a lot of things to accomplish in the rest of your day. So if you could give your younger self a bit of advice, a piece of encouragement, a juicy little golden nugget that could save some heartache, collapse time. This is the super expander moment that you get to share that wisdom with everyone else.
Mm. There's so many things, but I think I'm going to go with, this is a mantra I used to use all the time, is you know the answers. You might not like the answers, but you know the answers. You know what to do. You have everything you need inside of you, and your voice matters. Your voice matters. And when I look back at parts of my journey, that those words would get me through many, many times of doubt, is I have everything I need. Like, you have everything you need. Your voice matters, and you've got this. You've got this. Don't quit. Like, don't quit.
Okay, guys, you're going to write it on a sticky note and put it on your bathroom mirror and leave yourself a little love note.
Yes.
And remember that Marsha gave you that piece of advice.
Yes, whatever works, definitely. But honestly, pour more love back into yourself. Like, a little bit more compassion, a little bit more grace, a little bit more love is not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt, because no one else is coming. No one, I hate to pull a Mel Robbins for a second, but no one else is coming. Like, you can do this. You can create the change that you want. When I look back, there were times I never thought it would change. Never, ever, ever. And I'm actually really glad that my future self didn't give me a glimpse of what was on the other side, because I probably would have self-sabotaged it. I wasn't ready for what was there. We have to grow into those versions, right? We have to grow into those opportunities by doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so, so true. So how can the listeners find you? How can they enter your world? What's the best way?
I think the easiest way is on Instagram, is where I spend more time on Instagram than anywhere else. And it's just Marsha Van W. That's the exact same as my website, is Marsha Van W. I've got a quiz there about the blocks to owning your story, because I talk all about why we aren't owning our story. And my first book, my solo book, is called When She Stopped Asking Why. I have 2 podcasts, Own Your Choices, Own Your Life, and Everybody Holds a Story. And I am all about stories and learning how to show up and use your voice. So anywhere along those lines, you'll find me.
Ah, so good. You guys know to find it in the show notes, and go say hi to Marsha. Tell her, tell her hello and ask her all the questions about sharing your story. She is a wealth of knowledge. And yeah. So we'll have to do this again.
Mhm. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Corey.
so. Yeah, I talked over you. Thank you for taking the time, for showing up here, for just being an amazing human being. I appreciate you.
My absolute pleasure. My absolute pleasure. So grateful for you and appreciate you.
I will catch you guys on the next episode.